First, I'd like to thank Stefan and Francisco for inviting me for such a distinguished meeting. I came from Mansoura. It's a city in the middle of the Delta, 150 kilometers to the north of Cairo. And my main research interest is on CPAP and high-flow nasal cannula. Please, my talk today will be about high-flow nasal cannula. Please, can you prepare your Slido because we are going to have a few questions during my presentation. I have nothing to disclose. These are the outlines of my lecture today. I'm going to give a short note about the definition, basic design, mechanism of action, indications, evidence for safety and efficacy, contraindications, advantages and disadvantages, settings and protocol, implications for research and conclusion. So it's a very long list. I'll try to cover it in 30 minutes. First, what is meant by high-flow nasal cannula? And by high-flow nasal cannula, we have to have a flow which is higher than the usual flow we use in low-flow nasal cannula, and usually we speak about a flow more than 1 liter per minute. Although in practice, most units are referring to a flow from 2 to 8 liters per minute in neonatal care units. Of course, non-invasive ventilation has become increasingly popular in the NICU over the last decade, and CPAP is the gold standard, and especially in Scandinavia. However, CPAP has some drawbacks. First is the nasal trauma. Maybe it's not a problem in many Swedish units, but in some countries like Egypt, we have a major colomellar necrosis and major nasal injuries on babies on CPAP. Leakage, which make CPAP ineffective and lead to atelectasis and respiratory failure, and these babies usually shifted to mechanical ventilation. Pulmonary leaks, although the reports are variable, the COIN trial reported a 9% incidence of pneumothoraces on babies on CPAP. However, most other centers report an incidence of 1 to 2%. CPAP belly syndrome, the bulky interface of the CPAP, which makes CPAP usage difficult, especially with developmental care and fixation of the prong, uncomfortable hats and chain straps, and it required skilled clinical care and condensation in the circuit and the prong. So high-flow nasal cannula became quickly introduced into the neonatal care units since 2002. And it is prevailing and used in many neonatal care units nowadays, although the evidence for its use is not that good. My first question to you is, do you use high-flow nasal cannula in your unit? So we have a response rate of 100%. Oh, this is I think most of the attendees from Sweden. So I didn't have the data from Sweden, but I have the data from various reviews and surveys done in different countries. Germany, we have 93% of neonatal care units use high-flow nasal cannula. UK, it's 77%. USA, it's about 69%. Australia, New Zealand, 63, and Japan is 58. But here in Sweden, it's 100, so it's very high. And these reports also it showed us that there is a wide variation in the reported practice of the use of high-flow nasal cannula between different units, including the initial flow, the maximum flow, the minimum flow, and the weaning practice. But why are high-flow nasal cannula used nowadays in neonatal care units? Because the babies are happy with it. Several reports from different studies show that the babies are more comfortable with less pain during high-flow nasal cannula. The nurses like it, and also we have several studies looking at surveys between nurses about their impression about the use of high-flow nasal cannula in neonates, and more importantly, the family. Also, there are some surveys saying that parents are more happy when their babies are on high flow nasal cannula rather on CPAP. This is one of the surveys which show that most of the nurses in Australia, they like a high flow nasal cannula for babies more than 28 weeks gestational age because it's easier to use, more comfortable to the infant, causes less nasal trauma, and the parents prefer it. Although the evidence for its effect on feeding tolerance is variable. What is the basic design for a high flow nasal cannula? You have to have an air oxygen blender, and you have to have oxygen meter, flow meter. The flow is usually between 2 to 8 liters per minute. You should have a powerful humidifier, because humidification is very important during high flow nasal cannula. You have to have a respiratory circuit with a heated wire and an appropriate sized nasal cannula for the different devices, and water for irrigation. And the OptiFlow system have some pressure limiting valve as well. So remember that the triple H, you are talking about heated, humidified, high flow nasal cannula. So the flow should be more than 2. There should be adequate heating and adequate humidification. The temperature should be, of the inspired gas should be between 34 to 37 degrees centigrade, and 100% relative humidity is important. And humidification is important because it provides protection to the airway mucosa, contribute to lower failure and rate of extubation, and reduces metabolic workload. The nasal cannula is different from the nasal CPAP because it's small, thin, less than 1 centimeter, and more importantly, its diameter is small, so it allows leak around the nose, the cannula. Because in CPAP, you have to have a closed system to have optimal CPAP pressure. But in high flow nasal cannula, you have to have an open system. So there should be a leak at the nose with a ratio between the nasal cannula and the nostril should be less than 80%. And optimally, it should be less than 50%. And you should have also open mouth. So the bronch hang loosely around the cheeks. The bronch is slightly out from the nasal septum, so it will lead to less nasal trauma, and there is a leak at the nostril and the mouth, so the patient will feel more comfortable. There are 2 available high flow nasal cannula system nowadays: the Vapotherm and the Fisher-Paykel system from New Zealand. This is a picture of the Vapotherm, and this is the OptiFlow system, Fisher-Paykel. Which system is better? We have evidence only from a small randomized controlled trial on 40 ventilated preterm babies who were extubated either to the Fisher-Paykel or Vapotherm, and they have found no differences in the primary outcome of reintubation within 72 hours or secondary outcomes, including duration of mechanical ventilation and incidence of chronic lung disease. But this study also reported the difference in the price. The acquisition price for Fisher-Paykel is quite low compared to the Vapotherm, although the running cost is, literally speaking, is equal. Another study compared to a humidifier, the Fisher-Paykel MR850 with the intersurgical PMH 7000, and they have found no difference in clinical outcomes. However, the reported temperature and relative humidity was better in the Fisher-Paykel system. How high flow nasal cannula works? There is a debate and there is controversy about the mechanism of action of high flow nasal cannula. The main mechanism of action is the washout of the nasopharyngeal dead space, and this will lead to an improvement in the gas exchange. And this is very important in the premature baby who have a very large dead space compared to adults. The second, it decreases the inspiratory work of breathing because the high flow gives the baby inspiratory flow which is higher than the required flow for the usual required flow for the baby. It reduces metabolic overload by adequate humidification and heating of the inspired gas. It provides positive distending pressure, like CPAP, so it can give CPAP, and some people call it cannulopap. Warming and humidification of the gases improved conductance and pulmonary compliance, and it improves secretion mobilization. However, if we talk about delivering continuous distending pressure during high flow nasal cannula, it's different from CPAP. First, the pressure generated is variable. It is not measurable. So this gives us concerns about the pressure may go high and lead to pulmonary air leaks and pneumothoraces and things like this. So the pressure usually in high flow nasal cannula depends on 4 factors: the gas flow rate, and there is a linear relationship between the gas flow rate and the pressure generated. Usually each 1 liter increase in the flow gives you 1 centimeter increase in the delivered pressure. Leakage via the mouth and the nose, although there are different reports from different studies, but leakage is important for the success of the high flow nasal cannula system. Patient weight, and specifically talking about extreme low birth weight infant, where the same flow can generate very high pressure compared to larger gestational age babies. And of course the nasal cannula size, which should be optimal, and there should be an optimal ratio between the nasal cannula size and the nostril. What are the indications for use of high flow nasal cannula? Literally speaking, high flow nasal cannula can be used in any baby in whom CPAP is required. So mainly we are talking about post-extubation, primary respiratory support, weaning from CPAP, and other indications. But I'll concentrate my talk on these 3 main uses in high flow nasal cannula. And I should let you notice that in patients with significant nasal trauma and requiring CPAP, high flow nasal cannula has a role. What is the evidence? And when you talk about evidence, we talk about efficacy and safety. The evidence comes from 2 meta-analyses. The first meta-analysis was published in Pediatrics 2015, and the second, which is more important and more sophisticated, by Dominique Wilkinson, which was published in a Cochrane library in last year. So I'm going to concentrate my talk about the 3 main indications. Post-extubation. What is the evidence for use of high flow nasal cannula post-extubation? The evidence from the meta-analysis show, which included 6 randomized control and the quasi-randomized control trial, including about 1,000 infants. There was no difference between high flow and CPAP regarding death, chronic lung disease, treatment failure, or re-intubation rate. And these are the detailed meta-analysis, including subgroup analysis, although you can notice that there are very few babies less than 28 grams in these graphs. And this is the graph for the outcome of death. There is no difference between CPAP and high flow nasal cannula. Also regarding chronic lung disease. Regarding treatment failure, again, there is no difference. But you can see that there is a high grade of heterogeneity between studies. And we have these 5 studies in another meta-analysis done by Manley, and he has demonstrated that there are wide variability between the studies, including the study population, the flow used, and the weaning practices. Also, this systematic review have shown that in babies between 28 and 32 weeks, the rate for re-intubation was much less in babies on high flow nasal cannula compared to nasal CPAP. And this is a group of premature babies who benefits most from high flow nasal cannula. Also, this systematic review have shown that these babies have less nasal trauma, and there was a trend for a decrease in the rate of pneumothorax. And this was unexpected because most of us were afraid from that continuous distended pressure, which is unmeasurable used during high flow nasal cannula. But these data are reassuring. Also, we have some trends for a decrease in gastrointestinal perforation and neck, although this did not reach statistical significance, and there were no differences in other neonatal morbidities, and including IVH, ROP, and sepsis. This is a forest plot for the nasal trauma and for the pneumothorax favoring high flow nasal cannula over CPAP. So when we accumulate these data together, we can come to this conclusion. High flow nasal cannula may be used for respiratory modality to help reduce the need of re-intubation premature babies and could be a potential alternative to nasal CPAP in post-extubation state, especially if the baby is having nasal trauma. However, we have to take caution because these studies varied in the study quality. There was no sensitivity analysis for the study quality performed in this meta-analysis, and the main study included in this meta-analysis was a non-inferiority study. And if you talk about non-inferiority studies, you should talk about the non-inferiority margin, which was put at 20%. And this study, most neonatologists think that 20% is a very wide margin. And if they use a narrower margin, they will come to different conclusions. Not only that, but also the upper margin of the 95th confidence interval bordered the margin of non-inferiority in this study. None of the included trials were blinded for nasal injury, and methods of screening and the grading of nasal injury also were variable. Other forms of respiratory support were permitted, and only very few extremely preterm babies and late preterm babies were included in these studies. And there was a high grade of heterogeneity between the studies, as I told you before, and there were no data for long-term neurodevelopmental outcomes. Now we come to the second question. My question to you is, how likely do you think it is that the high-flow nasal cannula will be successfully preventing the need for re-intubation in a 26-week gestational age, 750-gram infant compared to nasal CPAP? Let's see the response rate. It's a very important question, actually. So we have a 55% somewhat disagree. Okay, let's go and look at the evidence. So if we go back to the Manley study, it revealed that a higher failure rate for infants less than 26 weeks gestation, which was 81 for high flow compared to 61 for nasal CPAP. Thus, the evidence for efficacy of high flow nasal cannula in extreme preterm babies less than 28 weeks gestation compared to other modes of non-invasive ventilation remains scanty and need to be the subject of future trials. Until then, this form of respiratory support cannot be recommended for extreme preterm babies. Particularly if we put in consideration this study. This is another evidence from a large observational study from a LAIR database from the United States. It included a very large number of babies, about 2,500 infants, extremely low birth weight. And this study has shown that babies who received high flow nasal cannula plus CPAP compared to those who went directly from CPAP, there was an increase in the incidence or combined outcome of BBD or death and BBD alone. And these studies, although it was criticized like any observational study, but also gave us a warning sign and warning flag that high flow nasal cannula in extremely low birth weight we should have caution for using. How about using high flow nasal cannula immediately after ensure technique, that's after short intubation? Is it successful? We have only one study, a single center study, small study, including 54 preterm infants, comparing ventilator-derived nasal CPAP to high-flow nasal cannula, and the outcome was treatment failure. And this study have found that the rate of re-intubation was higher in the high-flow nasal cannula compared to nasal CPAP with a p-value of 0.004, although there were no differences in other neonatal morbidities. So this is also is not reassuring for the use of high flow following INSURE. How about using CPAP, high flow nasal cannula for primary respiratory support? Of course, these babies have different lung physiology, and the main problem is the functional residual capacity. So the main issue is not the CO2 washout, but the delivered continuous distending pressure. If we go to the Wilkinson Cochrane review, we found 4 randomized controlled trials, and these trials have found similar failure rate between CPAP and high flow nasal cannula, no difference in death, chronic lung disease, duration of respiratory support, and these are the data. Although also we have no data from babies less than 28 weeks gestation. And there are no differences in other secondary outcomes, including nasal trauma, duration of supplemental oxygen, hospitalization, pneumothorax, and sepsis. One study from these studies compared high flow nasal cannula versus non-invasive positive pressure ventilation, and this study was done on 76 preterm babies less than 35 weeks gestational age, and the infants, they have found no difference in the primary outcome of treatment failure, and the high flow nasal cannula spent longer time on respiratory support, and there were no differences in the duration of mechanical ventilation for an endotracheal tube between both groups. And now we come to this study, which was a very large, multi-center study, which was conducted to evaluate the value of high flow nasal cannula as a primary respiratory support. This study was done on 9 NICUs in Australia and Norway for babies more than 32 weeks, and it included 564 preterm infants with respiratory stress, and they compared either to use high flow nasal cannula at a flow of 6 to 8 liters per minute to nasal CPAP at 6 to 8 centimeter water, and the primary outcome was treatment failure. And this trial was unfortunately stopped earlier before the planned number, which was 750 infants, because the treatment failure was higher in the high flow nasal cannula, almost the double. It's 25 compared to nasal CPAP, which is 13%. So these data actually are giving us warning against the use of high flow nasal cannula as a primary respiratory support. Although another smaller study was done in Korea and included a smaller number of babies, and it also was non-inferiority trial, and they have found no significant difference between the high flow nasal cannula and CPAP. If you look at observational studies, we have a large observational study which was done in 2014, and it compared the performance of high flow nasal cannula center to that's Vermont Expert Network database, and they have found that Vaughan centers primarily used nasal CPAP, and there was less mortality and nosocomial infection, less need for oxygen at 36 weeks, and less ROP in babies who received high flow nasal cannula. This graph shows that the babies in Vaughan were mainly managed with CPAP compared to babies in the high flow nasal cannula center, and this was reflected on a difference in the oxygen requirements at 36 weeks and the incidence of ROP requirement treatment at quarantine. If we go to expert opinion, there was this lovely study which was published in 2017 by Uder, and it included a survey among 7 international experts. 5 of them were included in trials using high flow nasal cannula as a primary respiratory support, and 3 of these 5 indicated that high flow nasal cannula can be used as a primary respiratory support for RDS. And all 3 noted that there was a special group of babies who benefit from high flow nasal cannula, those more than 30 weeks with oxygen requirements less than 30%. And 2 of the investigators think that additional data are needed before recommending high flow nasal cannula as a primary respiratory support for neonatal RDS. Based on these findings, the standard use of high flow nasal cannula as primary respiratory support in preterm infants who would otherwise receive CPAP cannot be recommended. However, important complications like pneumothorax, intubation were ultimately not different, and suggest that high flow nasal cannula may be an option for some infants without the fear of significant adverse effect, especially those who have a nasal trauma. I skip these slides, and if we go to the weaning from CPAP, the Wilkinson have shown 2 trials, including 150 infants, and they have came to the conclusion that if you use high flow nasal cannula as a weaning from CPAP, there will no difference in weaning failure or major morbidities, and the preterm infant randomized to high flow nasal cannula had reduced duration of hospitalization compared to those who remain on CPAP, and there were no data on long-term outcome. One of these studies was our study, which was published in Early Human Development in 2011, and we have found that babies weaned to high flow nasal cannula it stays longer on respiratory support and needed oxygen for a longer duration. Of course, this was another study which included 4 groups of babies, those who were abruptly weaned from high flow or abruptly weaned without high flow directly from CPAP, and those gradually weaned from high flow or gradually weaned from CPAP, and they have found no difference in the primary outcome, or which was the duration of respiratory support. And group 1 has a significant reduction in the duration of nasal CPAP and earlier corrected gestational age of nasal CPAP. There are also other indications, including meconium aspiration, and for the use for transport, and the use in the delivery room stabilization, but these only are small reports, so I will not concentrate for the sake of time on these. What are the contraindications of high flow nasal cannula? The main contraindication is the need for intubation, mechanical ventilation, ventilatory failure indicated by inability to maintain accepted blood gases, infants with sign of severe respiratory distress, those patients with unstable respiratory drive, significant active air leak, abnormality in the upper airway, including choanal atresia, neuromuscular disorder, or severe neurological impairment. What are the advantages of high flow nasal cannula? Less nasal trauma, ease for nursing, comfort for the baby, promotion of infant development, and it's very nice for developmental care, less abdominal distension, better weight gain and feeding tolerance, although the evidence for this is not strong, and of course the cost, which is appropriate for developing countries like mine. There were 2 studies that studied the difference in the pain scores in babies receiving CPAP and high flow nasal cannula. The first one was published by Gladberger in 2014, and they used Eden score as a measure of chronic pain, and they have found no difference between both. In another study, our group have published a study in 2015, and we have found that patients on high flow nasal cannula have less PEP score and less salivary cortisol concentration during treatment. And this is the study looking at the effect of high flow, whether it is better than CPAP for feeding tolerance. And this study was powered to look for this difference, and unfortunately they have found no difference between high flow nasal cannula and CPAP, so it's not beneficial for the effect on feeding tolerance. There are concerns about the use of high flow nasal cannula, but particularly 2 case reports reported a condition called pneumocophilus, scalp emphysema, and pneumoorbitis, which was fatal in 1 case because of the air dissecting into the brain, into the skull and pressing on the brain. And this is a severe complication reported also previously with CPAP, and we have to be concerned about it. Of course, the concerns about sepsis with Vapotherm, that's what are now less because they have modified the system and there are no reports of sepsis now. Now we come to the third question. Which of these non-invasive support do you think is loudest for the preterm? The Vapotherm, the Fisher-Paykel, the bubble CPAP, the ventilator-generated CPAP? No difference. So bubble CPAP 68%. Okay. Two studies looked at the noise level during this, and the first one was in vitro study, looked at the vapotherm, visual vehicle, and CPAP, and they have found that the noisy level in vapotherm was highest, followed by visual vehicle, and followed by CPAP, and all three actually have a very high noisy level above the recommendation of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Clinical trial published comparing bubble CPAP with high flow nasal cannula, Fisher and Bickel or Hudson CPAP compared to Fisher and Bickel OptiFlows, and they have found no difference between CPAP and high flow nasal cannula, although again the levels were very high compared to the recommended requirements by the American Academy of Pediatrics. Now come to the final question. What parameters do you use to initiate high flow nasal cannula therapy in your neonate? List the prospective initial flow. Okay, most of you use 4 to 6 liters per minute. So if we talk about a setting and a protocol, there are marked differences in the levels of high flow use and its escalation or weaning and discontinuation. So there is no actual dividends from randomized controlled trial. So when we talk about clinical experience rather than evidence-based medicine. So I give you my suggestion for the protocol for using high flow nasal cannula in your unit. It's not evidence-based, but it's practice-based. Usually you initiate the gas flow according to the birth weight. If your baby is less than 1500 grams, start with 4 to 6. If he is more than that, start with 5 to 7, and in full-term babies, you can start with 6 to 8. You have to monitor your baby for 3 parameters: oxygen requirements, the respiratory rate, and the respiratory distress score. And if the baby is worsening, and then you have to increase the flow by 1 liter per minute every 20 minutes to a maximum of 6 to 8 liters per minute. And again, if the baby is worsening, you have to shift to nasal CPAP at a pressure of 7 to 8 centimeters of water. And if the baby is not improving, you have to shift to non-invasive ventilation or invasive mechanical ventilation or high-frequency ventilation. If the baby is improving, then you have to wean the high flow. You have to first start with decreasing the FI2 to less than 30%, and then you start to decrease the gas flow by 0.5 to 1 liter per minute every 12 to 24 hours to a minimum of 2 to 4 liters per minute, and then stop high flow nasal cannula. If we talk about if you use it in less than 1,000 gram babies, the maximum flow should not exceed 6, and you can see CPAP from a flow of 2 rather than 4 in larger babies. This is only a suggested algorithm. There are a lot of implications for research for the use of high flow nasal cannula, especially if whether it is useful for primary respiratory support or whether it is useful for extreme low birth weight babies, how to wean, what is the initial flow, what is the maximum flow, all these are questions for more randomized controlled trials. So my conclusions is that high flow nasal cannula is emerging as a new respiratory support modality in the NICU. Its popularity lies in its use, ease of use, and the perceived comfort. There is wide variation in practice among different neonatal care units in the use of high flow nasal cannula. During high flow nasal cannula therapy, you use well-humidified, adequately heated gas. Careful and regular monitoring of the baby's response to high flow nasal cannula is important, and we use 3 parameters: FI2 requirements, respiratory rate, and the respiratory distress scores. High flow nasal cannula is not inferior and has similar rate of efficacy compared to other forms of non-invasive respiratory support, particularly post-extubation. And its use decreases the nasal trauma in preterm infants, but there should be a caution recommended for extreme preterm babies. and there is insufficient evidence for use as a primary respiratory support. No particular high-flow nasal cannula device is superior to the other, and the best and the quickest way to wean from high-flow nasal cannula remains uncertain. Thank you very much.